When you know you're going to be in a fight, you better be ready for a fight. Duh. Well, essentially, that's what Paul tells Timothy in 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 12. Fight the good fight of the faith. Now, spent the whole time last time on fight and the good fight, but I didn't say much at all about the good fight of the faith. Paul is not telling Timothy, fight for your faith. Not really. Because if it had been fight for your faith, there would have been that pronoun in the original text, which is not present. Paul writes, fight the good fight of the faith, meaning it's not his faith. Well, his faith is included, but it's the faith. Now, there's a couple of ways to think about this. We've talked about it before, but it's always worth going back to. First of all, there is a body of belief. There are, we would call them doctrines. Some people would call them dogmas. Now, dogma gets a bad rap. And sometimes it's because how dogma has been applied in history. It's been inhumane, actually. But dogma, all of us live by dogma. We have things that are firm and solid beliefs. These are issues of faith that they're not fluid. They don't move around. They're foundational and they're firm. Well, that's the faith. Jude talks about the faith once for all delivered to the saints, which is a very interesting idea because in Jude's day, in century 1, the New Testament was not yet collected, what's called codified. It was just a series of letters and documents from the gospel writers and the apostles that had been copied and circulated among churches. But every church didn't have every letter. And yet Jude talks about the faith once for all delivered, meaning that this is it. We have the body of facts, the data for our beliefs. I'm going to just touch on this because there's no reason to do a rant, but there is no new information about God. It doesn't exist. God has given us everything he's going to give us about himself, about his design, about what makes life work or not. We have it. Peter writes in 2 Peter, his divine power has given us everything we need for life and godliness. Now, I don't think that's just some overstatement. I think Peter is saying, we have everything we need in order to live a life of godliness and virtue and purpose. Well, so the faith, okay, it's not your faith or my faith, although, yes, I have faith, you have faith, okay? But the body of faith, this is what our faith rests on, sets firmly upon. Now, I may grow to understand that body of faith differently over time. I mean, I have. When I was a little kid, I had faith. I probably had in some ways, I probably had more faith when I was a little kid than I have today. It was mostly uneducated, but it was present. Over time, I have the combination of my life's experience and my study of Scripture have given me a different insight, a different view of the faith. And I don't think I'll get done. I think my deep desire from God is, and I know this is it's kind of silly, but I would love on my deathbed to have either a book or my electronic device in one hand, reading the Scripture or something that provokes me with regard to Scripture. Maybe even headphones in my ear to listen. I don't want to quit learning. I want to be a student of the faith as long as I'm alive. Fight the good fight of the faith. If you're going to hold on to the faith, you will do this in opposition to most of the systems in the world. That's just the nature of the world, and it has been since Adam and Eve were kicked out of Eden because of a bad choice, a sin. There are forces in the world that are, I don't want to get too kooky, but there are demons, and we have an enemy, Satan, and he is at work in the world, and I think he is at work within the systems, governmental, educational, societal systems in the world to advance his agenda, which is to do anything and everything he can to obstruct God's agenda. I could go more deeply into this, but I don't need to, so I'm not going to. There are guys that do. So if you're interested, let me know and I can put you onto some information. But here's the deal. The systems of this world will be in opposition to God's kingdom. There's this discrete difference between God's kingdom and the world. And you see it in the New Testament. Jesus talks about the world in terms of a system of values, beliefs, even laws, and his kingdom. And they're in opposition. They're not the same thing. Well, okay. Fight the good fight of the faith. How do you do that? Well, in these last few minutes, I want us to take a look at Ephesians chapter 6, and we're going to look at what the famous passage for most Christians that we have dubbed the armor of God section, and there's good reason for that. It begins in verse 10 of Ephesians 6. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. All right. So we're in this fight, and we need to fight the good fight, but none of us as individuals are up to this kind of battle. We don't have the stamina. We don't have the, on our own, we can't, we're inadequate, insufficient. But the instruction is be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power, so that we fight this good fight, not on our own. We're not just kicked out there to do the best we can. Verse 11, put on the full armor of God. Why? So that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. That's what I was talking about when we talk about the world systems. For Our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. We could go deeply into this, but I'll just put it in these terms. There is an unseen world where evil is at work. You may or may not see it. You may or may not feel it, but it's there. Paul was convinced, I believe, that this evil world, these forces against which we struggle, these rulers, authorities, powers of this dark world, and spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms, there is evil. I believe that the evil is embodied, first of all, by the master of evil, Satan. That he is a personal enemy. He's not just an idea. He truly exists, and he is the accuser of the brethren. He is the deceiver. These are terms that are used in the New Testament of Satan. And he has angels. These are spirits. They are not embodied, but they are at work. To what degree can they do their thing? How much can they influence? How much can they control? Well, that's a little bit undefined in Scripture, but they exist. Jesus did direct battle, confrontation anyway, and he always won. He was never very dramatic about it. I mean, he just said, "Come out, go, you're done." And these spirits obeyed him. Well, okay. This battle we're in, this fight, you got to fight the good fight of the faith, because Satan is at work, and he has an army. We don't know how many. We can't specifically identify them. Well, there are people who think they can identify demons, the demon of, and there are even people who believe that there are demons associated with geographic location. I'm not going to get into it, but I will say there are powers at work, and we need armor for the fight that we're in. In verse 13, put on the full armor of God, so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground, and after you've done everything, to stand. Okay, here's the picture. You're in a battle, and the enemy's coming at you. You got this armor, and the purpose of the armor is so that you can withstand the attack of your enemy. Stand firm then. You don't get to waffle. There's no retreat involved here, okay? Stand firm then. If you're going to stand firm, you better take a stance that you can hold, right? I could get into that. This is metaphorical. This is symbolic. But he says, stand firm then with the belt of truth. You start with truth. None of us knows enough of the truth. We got to keep adding to our understanding of the truth. But we stand, we take our stand, first of all, with truth. Not opinion, not trends, but with truth. And you will and boil away everything else for the follower of Jesus. What's got to be left is the body of truth. What is truth? That's where we stand. We take our stand. We stand firm in the truth. I have a lot of passion about this. I'm run out of time. So I'm going to come back to this armor of God thing next time on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.